I am super excited to introduce Dr. Daniel Kraft, who is our keynote speaker today. And it's pretty funny because Dr. Kraft was scheduled as our keynote in March of 2020, and we were super excited back then as well. But of course, as the events happened, we ended up canceling that showcase due to COVID, and we all went home for a really long time. So I'm really excited that we're able to get you this year, Daniel, and excited to hear your talk. Dr. Kraft is founder and chair of NextMed Health and founder of Digital Health. And he is a Stanford and Harvard trained physician, scientist, innovator, entrepreneur, and investor. And a really amazing person, and I'm sure we're going to be blown away by his presentation today. Dr. Kraft?
Thanks so much. A real honor to be here 5 years later. What a blink. Pandemic time is kind of crazy. So I've got 30 minutes to take you on a quick dash across what's now near next in health medicine and how it relates to pediatric and maternal care especially. And I'm trained in both internal medicine and pediatrics and med peds, and then did med school here, did med peds at Harvard, came back for fellowships here. So I'm a Stanford guy, and I have a proof of that. There's me back in medical school just 5 years ago. You might recognize the guy in the middle. He's here as well. Chief of General Pediatrics, Lee Sanders, one of my bestest and oldest friends. So great to be here at Stanford and to dive in with you. And of course, I woke up inspired to do a little bit of art about Stanford Children's Hospital. Of course, I'm lousy at art. We're all cheating now, of course, with these platforms that are getting better and better. You know, that was a year ago. It was lousy. And now, of course, you can do video on demand and all sorts of other things. I just met the new team from Gemini. I typed this out in OR in the future with robots and surging wearing a VR headset taking place on a space station with a view of Earth. Boom. There you have it. So pretty magical, right? And it's only been 2.25 years since GPT came into the world, and it's moved faster than any other technology. We promise not to talk too much about AI, but of course it's impacting our worlds in all sorts of ways. Even 2 years ago, it was better than most of us at passing the medical boards, and it's getting better and better since then. So it's a really interesting time, and disruption's happening. You know, the old players, the new old players are getting disrupted by the new players. And that, you know, gives us lessons for health, medicine, pediatrics. Already, parents are going to Dr. GPT to figure out, you know, the rare disease that their kid might have when specialists fail to make the diagnosis. We're already seeing, you know, the chatbots doing better than most of us clinicians. So it begs the question, what's the future of being a clinician, a pediatrician, a nurse, et cetera, coming downstream? We'll talk more about that. So bottom line, change is happening faster and faster. It's harder to keep up with what's new in AI or robotics or digital manufacturing or VR. So the challenge for all of us in the pediatric space is how do we leverage these technologies as things often move a bit faster than we expect. Kind of an old quote, the future's already here, it's just not evenly distributed. Here at Stanford, we have a future a little bit earlier, but I think the opportunity is to take some of these new technologies and beyond and make health and pediatrics and maternal care more equitable and more accessible. Recognizing that even today, though, it's still not perfect, right? There's still hallucinations, there's challenges, and there's also cognitive challenges. I love this quote from Sam Altman, the co-founder of OpenAI. GPT is like an e-bike for your mind, right? We're all cheating, we're using it to write our outlines, maybe our slides. But what happens if your kids never learn how to ride a regular bike? Or never develop their biking muscles, or the Stanford medical student never develops a differential diagnosis on their own? What happens to our cognitive abilities, per se? And actually, this study just came out the other day about how our performance and reasoning is kind of going down amongst teens and adults. You know, there's some downsides if we start to outsource all our thinking, just as an aside. But I'm an optimist, like many of you. I think there's not just going to be, you know, generative AI, but generative health, this idea that we're moving to this idea of multimodal agentic health where our avatars will be based on our age, our culture, our language, our personality type, our health goals, whether you're an adult or a family with kids. These sort of agentic elements are getting real very, very, very quickly. And just an example, this came out a week ago, is Sesame. So I had a little conversation with Sesame. Let's see what he has to say to us.
Hey, you're back. Guess we got cut off. What were we talking about?
Well, hey, Miles, I'm here with a bunch of really smart Stanford pediatricians. Can you tell them what you think the future of pediatrics is going to look like?
Well, pediatricians, huh? Talk about pressure. Okay, here goes my 2 cents, and everyone knows AI loves 2 cents. I think the future of pediatrics is going to be all about personalization. Like, imagine treatments tailored to each kid's DNA, figuring out problems before they even show up, and focusing on helping kids grow up healthy and strong, not just treating them when they're sick. Technology is going to play a huge role, but it's got to be the kind that works alongside those incredible doctors and nurses who already do amazing things.
That's great. I get you, but what do you think the pediatrician of 2035 is even going to get to do?
2035. That's getting sci-fi, huh? My guess? Think less checkers, more chess. I think pediatricians will be like these brilliant detectives. piecing together clues from a kid's genes, their environment, their lifestyle, figure out the best path for them. They'll be the ultimate coaches, helping parents navigate all the information out there and making sure every child gets the support they need to thrive. Think of it less like treating a cold and more like helping kids build the strongest, healthiest versions of themselves. You feel me?
I feel you. Thanks, Miles. See you later.
Catch you on the flip side.
All right. My talk here is done. Thank you. But that's just today, right? And that's an amazing, much more personalized versions are going to come out. So this future of health, medicine, pediatrics, maternal care is going to be much more intelligent, much more digitally enabled, a little more connected, and hopefully crowdsourced with information, and more precise, and hopefully proactive and preventative, and more democratized and equitable. These tools can sort of distribute in new, powerful ways. And so our optimization, I think our goal for part of today is thinking, where are we now, and how do we catalyze the innovations for pediatrics and maternal care that take us from now, mostly intermittent reactive sick care, to a future that's continuous, proactive, anytime, anywhere, with better outcomes at lower cost, enhanced by AI, but not replaced by it, that aligns with our workflows and our incentive models as we go forward. So of course, a lot of these changes are built on this convergence of many accelerating technologies. And that was the theme of a TED Talk I gave way back in 2011. There's an app for that, there's an app for everything. But the theme is appification means things can get faster, smaller, cheaper, and more available. It's at this sort of convergence point that the future of health and medicine, pediatrics and maternal care is going to be built. In fact, the technologies you see here didn't exist when I was a Stanford medical student in the 2030s. We didn't have Gen AI, we didn't have designer antibodies, precision medicine, robotic surgery, digital therapeutics, CRISPR, VR, AR. These are all amazing new tool sets that each of us as innovators and clinicians and writ large can leverage to reimagine health, medicine, pediatrics now and into the next decade. So I want you to sort of have a bit of the 10-year view. It's getting harder and harder to predict the future, but it's an exciting time to help build it. And for those of you who are investors, I also have a seed stage fund called Continuum Health Ventures. A lot of the next-gen companies are coming from folks not always inside traditional healthcare, but collaborating with clinicians, health systems, and beyond to build next-generation companies that really meet pain points and new ways leveraging these new tools and technologies. And so we want to think about not just, again, the sick care side, but when we have babies in utero or just born, the idea of wellness. How do we ensure that kids are going to have a long health span, not just a long lifespan, right? We want 120 to be the new 60, and that sets up, pre-birth and after-birth, and we have the opportunity to kind of blend those models, especially in the early ages of life. And so we're going to enter this era, I think, if we all stay healthy enough, of restorative medicine, which is going to be a very interesting new realm as well. Of course, we know a lot of what's driving health for everybody is not our fancy technology, but more the social determinants of health. And just a reminder, we need to be thinking about kind of our core elements: food, vaccine, water, vaccinations, but also the digital determinants of health. Do kids have access to school online if they needed it during the pandemic, or good battery life? Still a problem. Okay. So it's an interesting age. We mentioned, 5 years ago the pandemic started. That was certainly a big disruptor. We've seen many companies come and go and be disrupted by AI, big data, new forms of thinking. We've seen how COVID accelerated our ability to innovate here at Stanford and other places. And so the question is, how do we take some of that energy of the last 5 years of quicker innovation and collaboration to move us forward? Just like Sputnik set off the space age, COVID sparked a bit of a new health age. We can see if we can keep its momentum up in our challenging times we're all aware of. But I'm an optimist that we can have a new energy moving forward to reimagine healthcare and just kind of collaborate on what's next. So what's next? What's the future of medicine? I was lucky to write the opening article for Nat Geo 5 years ago, and the theme wasn't about any one technology, again, but how we put them together in smart ways. And recognizing, of course, it's not just about the technology. We have to understand our systems. And we know that we don't practice really evidence-based medicine. We practice reimbursement-based medicine. So the technology has to fit with our models and our incentives, which are often quite misaligned. So that's a harder nut to crack than technology. I've had an interesting role looking at this convergence for a few years. I've been chair of medicine for something called Singularity University. I built a program called Exponential Medicine, which is now called NextMed Health. And at the core there, it's bringing folks together from all these different realms, from AI to patients to clinicians, nurses, pharma, investors, to kind of see what's now near next in a new sort of way. So that's a new a platform that I've been running for more than 10 years. And it's not just about the technology, it's often about mindset. We had the head of NHS Innovation with us last time who shared this old quote, which I love. The difficulty lies not in the new ideas, but escaping from the old ones. So what old ideas might be holding you or your organization back rather than escaping from what's possible with the new ideas? So we're coming up to NextMed Health in 2 weeks from right now. Folks from Eric Topol to Lee Sanders to Robert Green to Dean Kamen will be there. So you're all invited. It's March 30th, April 2nd in San Diego. Go to nextmed.health for all the data. I'd love to have you there. Okay, so let's look at a few things from now, near, next. One of them we're familiar with in the pediatric space is genomics, right? 23andMe has been around for quite a while now. A genome used to cost about $10,000 a decade ago. It's come down about $100 from Ultima Genomics and others, expected to be $10 in the next decade. So how do we leverage that in our kids' care? Of course, we could be leveraging pharmacogenomics if it integrated into our workflow today. But increasingly, all of our patients will be sequenced in utero or shortly thereafter. Platforms like Nurture Genomics from Robert Green are trying to integrate that with pediatricians so we can find those rare diseases that often can be acted on proactively and make that information understandable because there's not enough genetic counselors. And how do we integrate that information back and forth to the clinic? Genomics England has now sequenced several 100,000 Britons, and they integrate that information back to the clinic and the learnings they take from the laboratory. And of course, we're going to understand almost every disease, whether it's autism or diabetes or any other disease at much more of its genetic level. So, for example, type 2 diabetes can be subsetted into at least 3 distinct genetic subtypes based on its genomics and AI sorting. So the nosology, as it's called, of many pediatric and other diseases will be redefined. And of course, we're not able to just read DNA. We can start to write it. CRISPR is not new anymore, but it's an amazing technology for many of our kids to start curing them, for example, for sickle cell. And I was a BMT fellow here. I treated many kids with transplant the old-fashioned way for sickle cell. Now, my friend, a fellow Aspen fellow, just climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. Wasn't a big deal for him. He's a pediatric ICU doc, but he brought with him Jimmy, who also climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, who 5 years before had sickle cell, but was cured by CRISPR, and now can climb Mount Kilimanjaro. Pretty trippy story. I got to share that with Jennifer Doudna a few months ago. So the art of the possible for knocking out diseases in kids, or the next level Nobel Prizes for designing drugs, is already quite magical. And I think, for many of our earlier patients, we'll start to understand their genomes and multiomics and start to vaccinate them, not just for infectious disease, but for neurologic disease and cancers when we know what their genetics are and be able to build N of 1 potential vaccines. So when we think about omics, don't just, of course, think about the genome, but now we have the proteome, the exposome, the metabolome, the microbiome, the sociome. A lot of that work has been pioneered at Stanford by folks like Mike Snyder. How do we put all that together, right? It's a lot of multi-omic data, and the future is going to be not one mode, but multimodal, right? Layering all these sets of information together, particularly for our youngest patients, right? The genome alone is interesting, but when we put it together, if every pediatric patient and their families and pregnant women and beyond have a digital twin, that we can start to model what's appropriate for prevention, diagnostics, therapy, and optimizing their health course and their health span, that's where it gets really, really interesting. And of course, this future is moving quickly, right? Exponentially, right? We're all familiar with Moore's Law, which is why even I still have my antique iPhone 2, which I forgot to charge, but still works. It was amazing 12 years ago. Now it feels clunky. But Moore's Law is powering a lot of this, right? A lot of what we used to have as analog devices are now digitized. That means they can be demonetized and sometimes democratized, making health and access more equitable. It means a lot of these physical objects are now basically dissolved into our visual devices, and that has implications for health and medicine. A lot of that, of course, lives in our favorite exponential technology, the smartphone, which has moved relatively quickly, dissolving into our Apple Vision Pros, which are still a bit kludgy and heavy, but will soon in the next day be in our contact lenses, or are going to enable us to interact with avatars that are already sort of here that we know aren't real, but we feel like they're real. Work by Jeremy Baileson here at Stanford means we interact with these things and we can be influenced by them. And of course, you can design them in very personalized ways that match the individual and how they might interact with them. And of course, we can all be turned into avatars and program ourselves. I just typed this last night, and here I am.
Well, hello there. This is Virtual Daniel. On behalf of Avatars Everywhere, it's wonderful to be back at Stanford for the Pediatric and Maternal Innovation Showcase to explore what's now, near, and next in health and medicine. Now, I'm going to rest my neural circuitry, so I'm handing it back to Real Daniel.
Okay, thanks.
I'll see you in the Mediverse.
So yeah, okay. So that's easy to do now. You can translate to Spanish or English. And of course, you can pop these avatars into clinical environments. It could be your nurse. I don't think we want to replace nurses. This is horrible marketing with AI for $9 an hour, but we have a shortage of nurses, and we can decrease the SCUT load and up-level them to do their top of license. That's a great example of these avatars in different places. So we're entering this world of often called, mixed, extended spatial computing reality. We're well past the Google Glass of a decade ago. Now these are, enabling, and coming to our Meta glasses, will enable clinicians of all sorts, whether in the operating room to integrate complex information, to do procedures in interesting ways, to be guided step by step with the glean learning of thousands of others. Of course, we can use lessons from AR, VR to up-level. I love aviation since I've been a pilot. Our analog cockpits are becoming digital. My plane now has a touchscreen. How do you take all these massive multi-omic data streams and make them a dashboard that that makes sense to you, gives you situational awareness, right? Not just from the helmet of a fighter pilot, but for the pediatrician, the family member writ large. How do you synthesize all this information? How do we use VR, AR, XR to not just see you of today when you look in the mirror, but you of tomorrow? You're doing your workout, your P90X, your push-ups, great, you of tomorrow, but if you keep having Dunkin' Donuts for breakfast, you of tomorrow. That can be a powerful lever for behavior change. Me of today, me of 100 donuts later. That's a powerful element. Or if you have an adolescent or an adult who smokes, and you can show them what's going to happen before smoking and after smoking, future you, that can be a powerful modality. Or if they're spending too much time on Instagram, which we know is a challenge. So these can be powerful modes for instigating change. So we can all be turned into avatars now. It's easier and easier, and it gives us a way potentially to interact with our future selves in powerful modalities. And you can turn yourself into one and see how you are before and after you have a diet, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, the clicker is going to get stuck on this. This is my friend who turned himself into an avatar and sees himself before and after. What about VR, right? It's fun to put grandma on a roller coaster. A lot of our kids like VR, right? It's being useful in all sorts of clinic spaces here at Stanford and beyond to make kids more comfortable, not have discomfort during a pain, beyond some great technology for minimizing fear from vaccines. But it also can be a therapeutic. It's almost like the new syringe. Pain management, Snow World, throw snowballs at penguins, and you don't need any pain medicine in some cases. It can make physical therapy much more engaging and gamified, this whole gamification element. We can use it to augment mental health. You put on an Apple Vision Pro, you can have a virtual psychologist show up, a virtual psychologist that looks like this.
Zaya is always there, ready to listen, to engage, and to talk about what matters most to you. So, how can I help?
So really interesting ways we can interact with virtual beings and agents. That's a really powerful example. And back to the VR, AR game world, there's now video games, medicinal media. A lot of kids and adults play video games. Now they can be used and hacked to improve mental health, to track mental health and put in physiology hacks. For example, this company just launched on Meta, and they now have FDA clearance for using these sort of elements for integrating mental health into video games. So that can be very powerful for kids and adults. And of course, for medical education, VR is a big changer. This is a platform developed pre-pandemic, the virtual heart. I can never remember tetralogy of Fallot, but now if you walk through that heart, you're going to learn it and understand it, whether you're the patient, the fellow, the family member, and beyond. So new ways to integrate this, including changing how many of us as clinicians train from see one, do one, teach one. Clicker, come on. To surgical simulation, right? See one, simulate before you ever touch a patient. So that's a game changer for medical education. And of course, when we bring that synthesized into the operating room and other places, we're going to glean the knowledge from thousands or millions of surgeries to be guiding clinicians step by step to uplevel the below average clinician to the top percentile as you go. And of course, robotics is entering that space, becoming more and more autonomous. For the next decade, we're going to see more, just like driving has gone from regular driving to driver assist to full autonomy. Some of that's going to come to different elements, and that can be very instrumental in surgical deserts around the world where there's not enough surgeons. So watch that space. It's getting super interesting. What about diagnosticians, right? We as pediatricians and in maternal health, we want to pick up problems early rather than late. A decade ago, we had the first examples of the EKG on a phone case from my friend Dave Albert. Now you see ads for that on CNN. You can buy I've got it in my pocket, the credit card version of an EKG. That can be useful in all sorts of settings. Other elements on the smartphone, don't need to, it's a bit disruptive, but otitis media, you can pick that up from a modified app and a smartphone and determine is that viral or bacterial, just from the look of the eardrum or the reflection you get using the app. You don't need to bring the measuring tools anywhere. Your camera, of course, can now measure vital signs in interesting ways. That can democratize vital sign tracking. Or ways to pick up, this is not a new platform, but Go Check Kids, a great way to, in the office, do elements of almost the medical selfie, right? The camera itself can do a lot now, including the face of the kid and picking up genetic issues, all the way to using it as a laboratory. I'm on the board of this Israeli company called Healthy.io for picking up a urinary tract infection or preeclampsia. You don't need to bring the urine to the lab. You dip it at home, take a picture with a smartphone with the FDA-cleared app. It tells you, do you have a UTI or preeclampsia or early kidney disease? Oh, easy peasy, right? So that's going to change diagnostics. The microphone on your smartphone, voice is a biomarker for neurologic disease, for mental health issues. Is that cough, croup, COVID, or a cold is all available today. Or even sound can be determining what your blood sugar level is for screening for type 2 diabetes, for example. So voice is a biomarker, voice for tracking our kids with platforms like SoundScats are all already sort of here. How do we integrate them into our practice is sometimes the challenge. So now with these new tools, what can we do with them proactively, right? We know that our bad behaviors, certainly often starting in childhood, drive most of our downstream costs. So now we can start to measure these behaviors, right? The first Fitbit only launched, 15, 16 years ago, and now there's a whole bunch of wearables for babies to adolescents to adults. And what's interesting about wearables and wearables, they're still quite consumerish, but they can start to measure almost every element of physiology and behavior, right? And that gives us a real opportunity to have a new lens into healthcare continuously. I've got a demo here in my pocket somewhere. There's a couple platforms not FDA cleared yet that will do real-time blood sugar and real-time blood pressure without blood and without a cuff. What is that going to mean for certain patients when we can have continuous streaming data like that? That's probably going to be on your Apple Watch in a couple years or your next generation Fitbit. Or how do you track a woman's health and avoid coming to the clinic when they don't need to be? All these are sometimes already here. How do we move them to integration, and how do we pay for them? How do we go from hospital to home? There's now an increasing number of smart patches that will basically give you an intensive care unit level of data on a smart patch. That means you can step down, take someone from the ICU to step down, or maybe admit them to the home for many elements and have not just the data, but the insights driven from these sorts of knowledge. There's ingestibles, Fitbits for the stomach. And in fact, last week, the first time I've shown this, I got a chance to try out this pill bot. There's a swallow pill bot now. It's drivable. It's like a little submarine. It's a little big, but you can still swallow it. I did 2 of them. And here I am driving this pill bot first in a little tank, and then I swallowed a version, and here I am literally driving.
Turn around to look to my pylorus.
Turn the sound up.
Is that? It's oriented up.
Yeah. So it should be behind you.
Exactly. Turn left. No, right. Where are the guns on this thing? Missiles?
Missile lock.
So that's me literally driving an upper endoscopy
And
in my
when
bot.
would
That was pretty interesting. That was last week. It's sort of insideable, right? There's patchables that are powered by body movement that will have ultrasounds based in them. There's earables that don't just be hearing aids but give you cognitive support. Insidables are sort of here that will end up tracking some of our chronic disease patients. Electricity is medicine. Some of that's been developed here at Stanford, not just pacemakers from the heart, but for the brain or for tremors. All these new things can come in new form factors. And of course, they're becoming consumerized. I mean, think about all the exponential technology that fits on a ring, or now a Samsung ring, or many other rings that, of course, can be really good at tracking our sleep, which many of us in clinical care don't get a lot of. So you can hack your sleep with these elements. But they can also, from the maternal care space, determine who's pregnant 5 days before home pregnancy test, just from the signal from your smart ring. Or they can recently publish at UCSF, they can determine your COVID booster, how you responded to a vaccine. Or just published recently biometrics of human pregnancy recorded by a wearable device. So for those of us taking care of pregnant women, you can see how they're doing compared to others and find out who's might be going to pregnancy loss early and intervene based on their digital biomarkers. So early days, but really, really promising. Or if you have an orthopedic kid and they've gone home from a procedure, an implant or a cast, are they walking more each day and doing better as you expect? Or are they walking less, just from their little simple wearable data? Nothing fancy that can enable us to intervene early, kind of in a remote setting. And speaking of mobility, that might be the new vital sign, at least for older folks. You can now measure your mobility in all sorts of ways with just a camera. That might be something to add to our sort of vocabulary of vital signs, so you can kind of get your own mobility score. And for those kids and adults who have challenges moving, there's a whole new generation of wearable exoskeletons for those of us who are normally abled and disabled. It's going to be very interesting for folks with CP and other realms going forward. Okay. Also on the diagnostic side, of course, is imaging, right? Moving very, very quickly to the point where you can now get your full body MRI done in 40 minutes, read by the AI radiologist. Here's me. The scanners are getting mobile and more portable, so they can help make access more equitable. There's now 0.05 Tesla MRIs coming out of China with AI on top that can give you almost what a 5 Tesla machine will do. So I think in a decade, each of us might go to a corner Walgreens or CVS or MinuteClinic, get your full body scan done, run by the imaging AI to do early screening for cancers and beyond, combined with platforms like Grail, sort of next generation diagnostics. So this really opens up new tools for all of us, clinicians and beyond, to bring diagnostics anywhere, right? This is some of the things in my pocket or my digital doctor's bag. There's now digital colposcopy. There's now portable breast ultrasound devices, whole sorts of new suites of tools. There's portable, next generation stethoscopes that medical students and others are using, have an EKG and heart sounds, and can do a better job than most cardiologists at diagnosing a heart murmur. Or many med students are now doing FAST exams, have their own portable ultrasound device. So anywhere in the world you can democratize diagnostics for kids and adults, and it's getting more and more powerful. I've run the X Prize. We did an X Prize for rapid COVID testing 4 years ago, and there weren't good rapid COVID tests. We're now getting used to these new diagnostics coming to our pockets and our homes. So it's a really new, interesting era when all these come together to sort of democratize health and wellness. Rural parts of India have very few primary care doctors. Along with Andrew Ng from Stanford and others, we recently launched a platform in India called Jivi Health, jivi.ai. It's a really smart multi-LLM platform that basically a doctor in your pocket. It has amazing diagnostics elements. Also has Ayurvedic medicine. You can talk to it in Swahili or Hindi or English or French, and it can give you early triage, but also gives guidance for proactive prevention too. That's culturally sensitive for India, but that's going to democratize care around the planet. So where does this all come together in the last 5 minutes, right? AI or IA, intelligence augmentation, is going to upskill all of us, right? It's already happening. We're going to hear from folks from Microsoft, and many of you are starting to use these tools to decrease your pajama time. It means you might need a radiologist at 2 in the morning. You'll get results from just a simple MedPalm. It's kind of combining forces. Radiology with a human and AI often gives you the best results, often kind of that cobot that gives you the best elements. We're already seeing it integrate into procedures to find lesions that might have been missed or might need to be targeted. And again, these sorts of tools can democratize diagnostics and early interventions around the planet, what's back of the retina or skin and beyond. And of course, medical errors are still a challenge. Integrating this multimodal data in the hospital setting and beyond will help us reduce those errors, whether it's sepsis or fall risk and beyond. So it's an interesting time with all these tools. How do we trust them? Some of you know Chris Longhurst, who was my intern here when I was a pediatric chemo fellow. I love this quote from him. Lots of people talking about algorithms, but seeing if they work in the clinical context is the real secret sauce. How do we trust and know trustable AI that we integrate into our care in ways that make sense? And when we're thinking about AI, just don't think about the AI part, but the physical part, we're starting to blend that with robotics. That space is getting really pretty amazing. It might be you porting yourself into a robot, but these, of course, are becoming more and more autonomous. So autonomous robotics are getting almost scary. So we want to make them fuzzy, a little more cuddly, kind of like Big Hero 6 from Disney. So social robotics can play a role from lonely adults to roles with kids. I've interacted with a few of these a few times. It's a bit dystopian at first, but you get used to it pretty quickly, and it's pretty interesting. It might be a smart dog with GPT that follows you around the house. Kids are going to be learning from robots and interacting with them. What does that mean? I don't have all the answers, but it's going to get interesting. And of course, they're coming to our homes faster than we might expect. And so watch for that. I think given the shortage we have of care workers in certain settings, robotics is going to play an interesting role writ large. So, and speaking of robotics, there's my 2 boys, they're 8 and 10. They went to their first robotics competition this weekend, and my friend Dean Kamen, who's going to be speaking at NextMed, started that. Get your kids into robotics early. It's an amazing platform if you don't know FIRST Robotics. So again, it's this blend, right? This isn't, being replaced. It's that old quote, AI is not going to replace your pediatrician, but your pediatrician using AI to replace those who don't. We need to think about how we collaborate, not get scared, but keeps our eyes open about how to integrate these tools going forward. Now, how do we synthesize this and use it today? There's a big emphasis often on digital health, the ability to prescribe an app for smoking cessation or for pregnancy or for mental health platforms or video games that are FDA cleared for treating kids with ADHD. There's all these new tools now that give us the ability to collect this data and not just have it siloed on your phone, quantified selfers, but quantified health. Whereas clinicians are going to use this data to be more proactive about wellness and prevention, to diagnose diseases earlier, and then therapy, which will be much more data-driven in real time instead of that intermittent realm, right? So each of our patients and ourselves and our communities will have a bit of a FICO score, a wellness index, not just our vitals in our labs, but our social scores and beyond, our sociome information. Each of our patients will have a bit of a check engine light, integrating all that data to give you early warning before they have a significant event, right? Even your Apple Watch today can give you early warning if you're outliers from your normal baseline. So this is coming fast. I think we're going to enter this minority report realm where we're going to know we have a disease, and our kids will and our families will before they show clinical signs. So that'll show up in all sorts of ways that match the individual and who and how they want to communicate with these sort of new agentic models. So a lot of this is already here, especially in pediatrics and all forms of medicine. How do you make sense of it? That was a pain point I tried to solve for. I went through Stanford Biodesign, find a pain point. My pain point was keeping track now of this explosion of digital health tools. So I built a platform called digital.health. That's the website. If you go to digital.health today, we have a formulary of now over 5,000 solutions. So you can go in and you might be looking at diagnostics and things that can track heart disease, like the AliveCore, and learn about the KardioMobile and learn its data and put it in your favorites and prescribe it to a patient if they have AFib, for example. Or if you're managing kids or adults with diabetes, you might find solutions that are therapeutic that leverage diet and nutrition and see platforms like Virta. So lots is already on there, including in AI, including in a whole section on pediatrics, a whole section on OB-GYN. So if you're looking for solutions, see what's there and think about how do we integrate that into our workflows going forward. So if you have a solution that's not there, it's free to add it. It's an open platform for all. So to close, I want you to think about all this new exciting stuff. It's a bit overwhelming. We don't want reams of data. No clinician wants more data from the patients. They want the insights, right? And a lot of the data, to be honest, is still siloed in EMRs and other records and telehealth and paper and genetic sequences. So the challenge isn't just more data, but to turn that into real insights and knowledge. And then that knowledge needs to go from being published and not wait 17 years, but to the bedside and the website in 7 minutes. That form of transformation from bedside to website. You need to narrow that gap. Implementation science is part of that. So part of that implementation is going to mean crowdsourcing. We all remember paper maps, some of us do. What if health and medicine and pediatrics and maternal care was more crowdsourced, integrating information, and we could all share to build better health maps for our individual health journeys, just like we have them for other journeys going forward? Or if some of you have been in your first Waymo in San Francisco or coming to the peninsula, what if self-health was more like self-driving healthcare? The journeys of the future were much more, the car knows who you are, it comes on demand, pricing transparency, right? It adapts to the weather, the traffic, crowdsourcing. That can be part of our future of care going forward. And of course, the practice of care is going to be more, not physical or virtual, but phygital. We could be combining forces. Big picture again, we're going to go from intermittent episodic data collected in the four walls of the clinic, the ER, the ICU, leads to our reactive mindset, waiting for disease to happen, to a future that's much more continuous, proactive, anywhere, anytime, much more democratized and equitable, hopefully, if we align incentives to bring care anywhere. Blending with virtual visits. Those chatbots and agents are going to know you and your patient, and will talk to you and triage before you ever end up in the ER, the urgent care clinic, and be part of our collaborations in care. So entering this metaverse for kids and adults is going to be interesting. It won't just be on your standard screen going forward as well. All right, so last point, what does this mean for the future of clinical care? Who do you choose for medical school? How do you train them? How do you train folks not just a good bedside manner, but a good website manner? Who do you select for medical school? The folks starting med school today won't finish pediatric or other residencies until 2033, 2034. How do we train them? How do we reshape our medical education to make sense of that in this new AI, digitally enabled, accelerating age? So big picture, things are moving fast. Many fields are moving quickly. It's not about any one exciting technology, but how they come together and converge that give us the opportunity to innovate in pediatrics and maternal care. You need to be thinking about not just where we are in 2025, which used to be the distant future, but skate to where the puck is going to be, as Wayne Gretzky says, in 2030 and 2035, and reimagine pediatrics and maternal care writ large, because it's our opportunity to go from now, intermittent reactive sick care, to a continuous proactive anytime, anywhere care that's much more accessible for all moving forward. And not to take incremental steps, which we tend to do in healthcare, but take much more exponential ones. The future is already here. You guys are building it. And it's our opportunity to collaborate, build that future together, not just predict it, but create it for all of us, for kids and adults around the planet. So with that, thanks a lot. I covered a lot. If you get that QR code, you can download all my slides. And I hope to see you in the future at Next Man Health, Digital Health, or beyond. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Daniel. That was inspiring, exciting, overwhelming, a little bit scary, but just as amazing as I thought it would be. And I'm sure we all got a lot from that, and we'll follow up and see you at your conference later this year.